Hey, Afrin.
Hi, hello.
Hello. So we decided to record ourselves having a conversation now. I don't want to call it a podcast and get ahead of myself. But yeah, essentially just, you know, for two recruiters to just chat about whatever is happening in their lives and also in the process, hopefully give some actionable advice to young recruiters starting out and perhaps some uh, interesting thoughts for hiring managers, recruiters, whoever's watching this or listening to it, if at all anyone is, to chew through and maybe think differently about their whole recruitment process, recruitment strategy. That's basically what this conversation is going to be about. But before we, do all of that,
Yeah,
who are you? I think I know, but would be nice just for whoever's listening to get a quick understanding of who you are, what you do, and what got you here.
got it. Thank you so much, Akshay. I think it's a good idea to begin with the basics of um, recruitment and so about me. I am currently a recruiter at Morgan Stanley, and as per my previous experience, I hold around 6 years of experience. Particularly in recruitment, I have around 5 years of experience. And yes, this is a little bit about me. I am responsible for leadership hiring at Morgan Stanley currently. And yes, over to you.
And how did you end up here? Like, as in, uh, it's like if you were to ask a 5-year-old what do they want to become when they grow up, you're gonna hear things like an astronaut or an engineer or a doctor, but nobody says recruiter. And
Hmm.
what what made, I mean, how did you end up here? How did, why did recruitment choose you, or why did you choose recruitment?
Absolutely. I think recruitment definitely chose me, and it happened by accident. It was not something that was a conscious choice because the reason we've not been shown the parts of what recruitment looks like, how important it is, or it's not out in the open, right? It's just
Yeah.
another HR is what something is communicated. And I was particularly a part of a non-profit organization earlier, and that is when one of the founder, the core founder, did suggest whether you could just take up recruitment for some time. And that is how, spending time in recruitment, I got an exposure to what the process looks like for hiring for an organization and what goes into
Hmm.
it. I started enjoying that journey. So long story short, I started enjoying it in a way that I wanted to continue it full time, and I decided to pursue that as a career. And to that, it's been around 5 years now, and totally, I don't regret that decision even like a single day. Yeah.
I'm sure you. That's a total lie. I'm sure there are days where you wake up, pulling your hair out. But nonetheless, I think yeah, very similar journey
Yeah.
myself as well, right? I think I started out. Well, I mean, I sort of dropped out of college and did very random things for a couple of years. Ended up again in a non-profit setup, and it was a very startup-y environment where you sort of solve whatever fire is on at that point in time. You sort of jump into it and try and solve for it. So to that effect, held multiple different roles there. I think being the curious kind of person that I am, I've always wanted to understand how organizations are built, how organizations function. And I think I held the role of a recruiter briefly with them for about a year and a half. I have totally 8 years of experience. A year and a half of recruitment back then. And I realized actually this is probably the one role that gives me a ringside view of how organizations take decisions, what are the challenges that they're facing and how do they plan to overcome it, you get an understanding of that in this role, right? I
Yeah.
think that's what fascinated me the most.
Yeah.
And of course, ultimately, it also boiled down to like the fact that you talk to so many different people and have your worldview changed perhaps every day, every week. Some conversation you might have with somebody, either an internal or an external stakeholder, that has kind of really shaped the way you think. And I think the fact that this kind of there is a role that offers you that kind of learning opportunity, I would say, I think that's probably what got me into recruitment. Post that nonprofit stint, I did a bunch of a lot of other things. Both of us ended up working together at another think tank kind of an institution. That's where we
Yeah.
met, and of course, post that, currently I lead talent acquisition for a space tech startup based out of Bangalore. So I think between you and me, like multiple different perspectives, different journeys, but I think fundamentally the same um, instinct and curiosity, I would say, to want to learn and do more. And
Yeah.
also, something I recognize in you as well, there's a little bit of that sales instinct. I think that's also recruitment as a role really helps you chase a certain number, chase a certain goal, and rewards are a lot more immediate than most other roles that you might hold in an organization. So in that sense, yeah, that's primarily what motivates me as a recruiter. That's also more or less what my journey has been like. So yeah, that's about me. But but yeah, now that we've covered why we do what we do, what is it that we do? Like, what is a recruiter?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think is a recruiter to your mind?
If I have to like make it into a layman term, um, it is on the zoomed out purview. It is how organizations are building.
Mm,
How are we identifying people who can complement each other that will help them
mhm,
succeed in a very common uh, vision objective, right? And
okay.
people who are driven by a similar objective, identify them, find assess their skill set, and maybe bring them to the organization. Is a what zoomed out view is of a recruiter.
So in that sense, would you say like a recruiter is kind of like a matchmaker of sorts? You know, not a marriage broker, but a sort
Hmm.
of a matchmaker of um, skill sets, abilities, maybe sometimes also in some instances stage in life,
Yeah.
uh, and plucking that talent out of the market and presenting it to your organization. So in that sense,
Yeah.
yeah, would you think of it as a matchmaker or a salesperson or what is it?
Sometimes yes. Given our experience being in like smaller organizations, larger organizations are generally have, unless it's a very new addition team, they have a very clear objective of what they want, how they want, what background the person should come in. On the contrary, a smaller organization doesn't, there is ambiguity of what they
Mm,
exactly want, and there you require sales, right? And maybe in larger organization it may sound like a matchmaker. In smaller organization it becomes like a sales where you are giving what the organization is envisioning, what does it where are the aspirations of the organizations. So I think you
mm,
play both the roles.
mm,
Sometimes you have to be a salesperson in explaining what this role looks like out of the job description. On the other
mm.
hand, where the credibility of the well established organization will already like sell it for itself. So I think
Correct.
sometimes it's a little low key sales, and sometimes it's a very hard sell that you have to do.
Mhm.
Is what I think.
But I think that's an interesting distinction you bring about, right? I mean, something like a small organization, startup, let's say a startup versus a well-established legacy organization,
Yeah.
and the nature of a recruiter in both of these instances changing according to the organizational needs that they're servicing. And like even to my mind, you're bang on in a sense that in a startup environment, more often than not, you're playing a salesperson both internally and externally, right?
Yeah.
Externally, you're selling the potential the organization has. You're selling the work culture. You're selling the fact that it's a very intense, high velocity, problem-solving environment. And internally, you're trying to sell to the hiring manager that, hey, this is the right person for you. I've
Hmm.
understood your problem. I've spent
Hmm.
enough time within the organization to understand what we need, and this is the right person for us. And I personally don't have a lot of experience working with large organizations as a recruiter, but I would lean to you to maybe shed some light on this. How does it, let's say, how does it change in a large organization setup? Because in a small organization, just to give you some background, more often than not, you're hiring less for the organization and more for the hiring manager, right? What ends up happening is in smaller organizations, there's fewer people doing any particular task.
Hmm.
You don't have a lot of redundancies. You don't have a lot of uh, systems and processes in place that will just, you know, have things keep moving.
Hmm.
It is always people dependent. So to that effect, in smaller organizations, often what you end up seeing is um, the intent behind hiring for a team or building a team out is to help the manager at the very top perform better, right? They might be personally good at, let's say, just take a typical sales function. If the person is personally good at opening doors and having those conversations and closing deals,
Hmm.
and they personally don't have a liking for um the pre-sales process or the farming process of just making sure that the leads are kept warm and
Hmm.
kept, engaged, then the kind of hiring you do might change. You might just say, hey, I want somebody who's really good at maintaining relationships. I don't want them necessarily to open doors or go for the kill or any of that. Or you might say, I want somebody who's kick-ass at the pre-sales component of it. But ultimately, all of this is to service or set up the hiring manager for success. Whoever is hiring for that role,
Hmm.
it's based on their personality, based on their immediate needs that they're trying to fulfill.
Hmm.
That's typically how, recruitment functions in a early stage or forget the stage, but the size of the organization. If it's a
Yeah.
30, 40 people organization, that's typically how it works.
Yeah.
And does that change in any way for like a large organization like the ones you might have background in?
I mean, absolutely. Like you mentioned, here at larger organizations, we are helping the hiring manager. It's like assuming in a larger organization, there are multiple smaller organizations. So the
Hmm.
purview is not that you are contributing. Of course, you are contributing to a larger organization, but it is indirect contributing to a larger organization because you assume that there's a smaller organization in that which has to succeed for the larger one to succeed. And for that
Right.
smaller team, or the hiring manager, or there are set processes in the of how do you do,
Hmm.
what do you do, uh, where do you bring that person from, because you are studying what the teams how the team is built in the past. And
Or
yeah.
are you also studying how this hiring manager wants to build their team? Or
Yeah.
are you just looking at historic data and just saying, hey, historically we've hired people like this, so you better hire people of this background, this pedigree, this work experience? Or do you look at the hiring manager and say, hey, this person seems to want something different, so let's go and get something else?
Yeah, yeah, it totally depends on the hiring manager on what they want. Sometimes it's set that okay, this is the job description. Like find whoever, right? And
Hmm.
keeping in mind the prerequisites. But otherwise, if there is an openness to explore, or there is an openness, okay, like maybe even if this is there and A is there and B is not there, I'm fine with it, as long as the person
Mm.
is willing to put that effort. So it's like
It
a
boils down
smaller
to the hiring
organization
manager.
only. How
Mm.
we hire for smaller organization, it's just a different team, but the processes are not ambiguous. The systems are in place, processes are in place, you have to follow, abide by those processes. So
Understood.
yeah, I think the larger organizations uh, do have certain benchmark that they want to hire, because of the credibility that they have built is through those people have built those credibility. So they would want to go back, understand.
So what has worked for them in the
Yeah,
past and just try and replicate that
correct,
success.
correct.
Yeah, that makes sense. But also what's interesting is like the fact that fundamentally recruitment is about the hiring manager, right?
Yeah,
Um, you are whether it's a small or you're a large org, at least in my experience, it has always been about the hiring manager, and it seems to be the case over at larger organizations as well. Is that
yeah.
like a recruiter's fundamental responsibility in that way becomes empathy, like in a sense that you need to have an extreme amount of empathy for who it is that you're hiring for,
Hmm.
um, and understand one the things that they're articulating as well. Like sometimes they might be hyper competent or like and they know exactly what they want. But more often than not, you see that as a recruiter, people don't know what they really want in another person.
Yeah,
Uh, they're more worried about solving a problem. They might have an immediate problem that they're facing that they want to offload to another individual, but they don't have
yeah,
a full understanding of what that individual looks and feels like. And I think that's probably one critical area that I mean, I would say that's the only job a recruiter that a recruiter has that cannot be replaced by AI, right? I think
yeah,
that is where the people side of things comes into play. Your ability to read between the lines and also look at the market and say, hey, you want to solve for this problem, there's this kind of a talent. But if it is a problem that is framed a little differently, then perhaps there's a different kind of talent that's available for you in the market.
yeah,
Just being able to do that, I think, is fundamentally what a recruiter is supposed to do. And I think that's also the fun aspect of the job, the fact that you do your own research, you understand what is available out there, um, and also understand the problem in all of its details. Whatever problem that the hiring manager is trying to solve for, how do you make sure that you're understanding it fully well or sufficiently well before you go out there and start uh, hiring for people? Like I think one of the biggest frustrations I personally have with with the general perception of what a recruiter is supposed to do
yeah.
is the fact that you often see candidates and hiring managers sometimes walk into a conversation just assuming that hey, you're just trained to do checkbox activities.
Hmm.
You just your job is to just go out there, talk to a candidate, and just you know ask them basic questions and
Yeah,
then pass them along.
yeah,
um, I mean, yes, of course, there are recruiters that do that, and there are organizations that need that 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 have that kind of a need.
process. Yeah.
But more often than not, for high functioning, high performance teams, you also need a high performance recruiter
Hmm. Yeah.
who's not just doing the checkbox stuff, but is also proactively leaning into the business and understanding deeply what it is that they're trying to solve for at
Yeah.
at a very problem statement level,
Yeah.
and then branching out from there to say, hey, okay, now let's look at the talent, let's look at the people, let's talk to. Sometimes it also boils down to the personality. Like sometimes you realize that some of these roles are less to do with skills and more to do with certain character traits that
Yeah.
individuals might carry. You might want somebody with a lot more resilience
Yeah.
in a certain kind of a role. Or in other cases, you might want somebody with a lot more organized thought process or structured approach to problem solving.
Hmm.
Because increasingly with AI coming in and everything, the more checklist activities, more process driven activities can easily be automated.
Yeah.
Organizations are feeling the need for problem solvers. And what an ideal problem solver, there's no real answer. Like every organization is different, every hiring manager within that organization is different.
Yeah.
Um, so, so I think that's where, for me personally, also there's a lot of kick in the job. That even within one organization, I understand that okay, overall there's a certain cultural milieu that exists, and you want to look for people who are able to conform into that environment. But at the same time, because every hiring manager is different, their communication styles are different, their personal needs are different. Um, you end up having to customize and modify your search accordingly, and I think that's a super critical aspect of the role as well.
Yeah.
Um, Now, from a young recruiter's point of view, right? If they had to ask you or me, um, what are the skill sets that I need to develop as an individual to be a good recruiter?
Hmm.
What would that be? What is your answer to that?
Mm, if I have to like give like top three, um, one is you have to be structured in your approach. Um,
Hmm.
Structured covers documentation, organizing, etc. Second is how inquisitive you are, to know
Hmm.
more, to understand more, to read more, to identify, right? And third is communication, right? How do you articulate? How do you sell? How do you pitch? So that will come from how well you understand. So I think these
Hmm.
three would be my top three very important skill set for going about for
Right,
recruitment. Yeah.
got it.
What is your top?
Well, I'm not going to say structured approach because I'm personally not a very structured guy.
Hmm.
Um, but that has not made me less efficient as a recruiter, I must say. I think one of those things, the structuring is one of those things where it helps in any role that you might hold, whether a recruiter or a salesperson or whatever.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things also you end up having to learn because that is the only way you grow in any organization. So in that sense, I'm not inherently a very structured person. I
Hmm.
have grown to become one because that's the organizational need, or that's something that takes you from one stage of the career to the next. But the other two, I'm totally in alignment with you. Like communications comes first for me. Your ability to articulate ideas, understand complex ideas, and re-articulate it, and also customize it according to who's listening, right? To
Yeah.
be able to do that, to judge the other person and understand very quickly, what motivates them, what can I say that can maybe um, get them to be excited about this opportunity or this role.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, communication. And two, definitely being inquisitive, being resourceful, thinking outside the box. Um, because fundamentally, people are people. All people have inherent skills, abilities, and there is no reason why somebody who's solving a problem in FMCG will not be able to solve a problem in banking. But that being said, of course, it boils down to your ability to do that research and understand, okay, what specific area within FMCG does this talent or does this skill set exist that
Hmm.
I can just pluck from there and bring them here.
Yeah.
Or if I mean, this is again, all of this is in the context of a very high functioning, high performance team. if you're talking about large scale roles where you're just hiring the same skill set in large masses, then that the equation changes a little bit. But I'm talking about niche kind of recruitment that both of us are familiar
Hmm.
with. I think third thing, most importantly for me, I would say is resilience, right? Because as a recruiter, you end up having to face the rejections all
Yeah.
day long.
Yeah.
Uh, Rejections from your hiring manager, rejections from your candidate.
Idiots. Yeah.
Uh, so in that sense, it's a tough job. Just being able to disassociate yourself from the from the outcomes that you're able to bring.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, if because this is an answer that is going out to a young recruiter, I would just leave it at resilience and not complicate things too much
Yeah.
because it'll just be like, hey, you will hear no's every day. And you just have to live with it. That's the reality of the job.
Yeah.
Uh, got it. Cool. I think we've covered a lot, quite a bit
Yeah.
in this conversation. Any parting thoughts? And also, just as a like we've discussed a lot, but um, what do you think? Uh, what is your plan for these conversations? Like, how do you think? Why did you agree to have this chat in the first place? Maybe as a
So
parting note.
my idea is that to give a picture of what happens on the other side of the recruitment, right? I think
Mhm.
the candidates who are in process or are looking for jobs, um, or are applying, are in touch with the recruiters, are very furious at times because they don't hear
Mm,
back, because they don't hear at an appropriate time, they don't hear properly, or they're not given feedback. There's a lot of heat around that, and to be able to address what is happening on the other side, what goes into the whole process, my idea was to like let this picture out one by one, addressing
mm.
the questions that are very very frequent and common, that come up in public or on social media, and yeah, one by one elaborate on that topic and help understand what happens, right, as per experiences both of us have.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm totally aligned there. I think, again, for me, it was just a way to blow off some steam and have a conversation with an old friend who also perhaps understands the kind of challenges that a recruiter faces sometimes. Because something that you alluded to earlier as well is more often than not, HR and recruitment is used interchangeably. Um,
Hmm.
as a or understood in a very interchangeable sense in most organizations, most people's minds.
Hmm.
And I feel that myth needs to break a little bit.
Yeah.
A recruiter is not an HR. You
Hmm.
can't go to them with the same kind of problems, or they're also not going to have the same approach to what a conventional HR person um,
Yeah.
would have for any given problem statement, right? Recruitment is an independent and a separate practice in and of itself. And hopefully, through these conversations, I'm able to shed more light on that. Um, Maybe talk through the talk through the role itself in a little bit more deeply in a thoughtful way,
Yeah.
so that hopefully, there is some shift in not just in the way people perceive the role, but also how general people perceive the role, but also how recruiters perceive the roles
Person. Yeah.
ourselves, right? Because more often than not, even recruiters themselves fall into the trap of thinking of themselves as an HR,
Hmm.
um, which can be very limiting and creates a lot of cognitive dissonance in their own minds. And I see a lot of people struggle with it. It's it's largely because one, as a recruiter, you have to kind of be the bad cop
Hmm.
more often than not. And if I was an HR person or a people ops person or something like that, um, the opportunities for me to be the bad cop are few and far in between. I don't even want to be the bad cop. I often want to be a receiver of a sponge that's able to absorb the anxieties and stresses that's around me.
Yeah.
That's perhaps the DNA of a people ops person. That's not necessarily the DNA of a recruiter, although you do a
Yeah.
little bit of that. I
Yeah.
think somewhere it's also about pushing back, having a holding your ground. I think those are the areas where more often than not people kind of struggle with.
Yeah.
Even I've seen even experienced recruiters fall into this trap. So hopefully, these conversations are able to
Yeah.
shed more light on all of these things and maybe give um, language to some of the things that full-time recruiters might be facing, so that they're also able to
Yeah.
listen to it and empathize with it, understand that okay, this is not just them who's going through these problems.
Yeah.
So that's primarily what my motivations are. And hopefully, other people are willing to listen to this as well, and it's not just the two of us. And yeah, um, eventually, perhaps we'll figure out
Yeah.
specifically what do we want to do. But at this
Absolutely.
point in time, that's all I have in mind.
Got it.
Cool, lovely catching up, Afrin. It was great meeting you after a very long time. Hopefully, we do this more often,
Yes.
and whenever it is, I think
Likewise, I
we'll
think.
record
Yeah.
it and make sure
Yeah.
make it have other people's problems soon.
Yeah. I would love to hear questions also and then accordingly take it ahead.
Yes.